Hi, it's Ian and welcome back to my 30 days of knife skills. Today is day 22 and I am working with red cabbage, one of my favorites. A very common thing for me to have in the house, and pretty much everything applies with red cabbage as green cabbage, except I think red cabbage is more dense, it's a little bit more fibrous, and it can take a little bit longer to break down from cooking or salt. So it also has a little bit different flavor, of course, but mostly it's the same kind of idea. So this came from the farmer's market today, and it looks very good. It's heavy for its weight. The outer portions look good. I think just this one piece, I'll remove just this one piece. Sometimes you just need to keep removing until you get rid of all of the brown or kind of ugly spots. But this one I think is okay, so just that one is okay. It's probably less common to use red cabbage whole to make cabbage rolls, but I'm sure it's possible to do that. So if you were to do that, that's the only time you would leave it whole and try to peel it. So this root end is kind of big, so I would take some of that off and try to get it easier to take off one whole. It's going to be difficult with this one because it's so tightly wound. Take a little bit more off. Yeah, this one is very difficult to take off the whole leaf. It'll probably break in half, which is probably not the biggest deal if you're going to make cabbage rolls. So if it was less tightly wound, then it would be a little bit easier. But yeah, there might be other reasons to want the whole leaf. You could blanch them like this, or maybe use this as a bowl or decorative kind of thing. You could do that, but generally I'm not doing that with red cabbage. Usually I am either chopping it into chunks or shredding, slicing very, very thinly. So pretty much every single time the first cut is going to be in half. And you can definitely see how tight everything is on the inside. So the next thing to decide is if we want to work with it from this stage or to actually go into another quarter this way. There's, of course, reasons you would do one or the other. For example, if I was going to chunk it, then maybe I don't want to make the middle part even smaller than it is right now. So I might go into this kind of cut next, like that, and then take this out, and then you could separate it to get more control. It depends on exactly why I'm cutting it into chunks, if I need very, very even pieces or kind of roughly even pieces. But at this stage, something like that. Very even, kind of square, rectangular shapes. So that would be great for a stir-fried cabbage dish where you want everything to cook at the same rate, and you won't have some tiny pieces, and you won't have giant pieces that don't cook, and the tiny pieces kind of get all over the place and get a little bit mushy. Or braise, or you could do this in the oven as well. So that might be one way to do it. So you could keep going and maybe at this stage break this down a little bit more, or something like that should be okay. I will wipe my knife because it does tend to react a little bit more with red cabbage. This is not a stainless but a carbon steel knife, so it can react a little bit. That's probably why there's some coloring, it's already turning blue at this point. It's probably because it's reacting with the carbon steel. So that's how I would do a careful chop. A little bit less careful and quicker one would probably start making the second cut, and most of that core is gone. So then I would go here, here, and then down this way. So it's going to be a little bit less even because we're working with that kind of rounded spots. So some parts will be nice and square and rectangular like what we had earlier. And we also have some tiny pieces on the bottom, and some pieces will be longer. So that is, if even size is not a big deal, then that's quite a bit faster to do that way. Next would be going into the shredded, which I most often do that for making sauerkraut and coleslaw. Those are the two main things that I would be shredding. And I would usually just do it with a knife because it's always out, and I'm very comfortable cutting very small pieces. So something like that, quite thin. So that's okay. Sometimes this is not a huge cabbage, so it's not hard to work with. But sometimes the bigger cabbages it kind of gets hard to work with. It's a lot of fiber to cut through in terms of the height. So it might make sense at this stage to just separate it into a few different layers. And if I was going for more evenness, obviously as we go more and more in, it's going to get shorter and shorter. So sometimes to remedy that, whether it's in two pieces or even if I keep it in one piece, I'll just make a half cut on the upper layer. So I went in about to here. So that the upper long pieces are in halves, but by the time we get to the short ones, they're all intact. So that's another trick that I do often, whether it's keeping it intact or separating it. So in this case, if I separate it, the upper ones I would just break in half or cut in half, and then keep the inner part the same. So this makes it easier to cut because there's less to cut through and there's less height. It's easier to keep everything even like that. Same thing here, easier to keep everything even. That. But if you're going to do a lot of cutting and you are very concerned about keeping it even, nothing beats the mandolin. And I like using this Japanese mandolin. It's a very famous brand that's very common to find in stores, Ben Reiner. And I like this one a lot because it's adjustable. The thickness is adjustable with this very, very simple knob on the bottom. So you can just carefully feel here for the thickness, which I usually do, or look down and see about how thick it is, or just cut a few. Maybe do a few and look at it, and yeah, that's pretty much the same size that I was cutting. But it's also possible to go thinner than what I can do with a knife consistently. Go very, very thin, which is quite nice because this red cabbage has more fibrous texture. It's quite nice to go this thin and then just have it raw in a salad. It might be too thin to make in a coleslaw because that'll kind of break down with some time. But if you're going to just have it fresh on a salad, like this kind of thinness would be really great. It's pretty challenging to do that even with a sharp knife consistently. So that's great. This one particularly also, you can take the blade out and sharpen it, or put in other blades that, I think it came with a few different blades. There's also another blade that you can put in that's vertical that is supposed to give you a julienne going this way. So you have teeth coming up, and then you have this blade. So it's supposed to, in one motion, you're supposed to be able to do that. I don't usually use that attachment, but anyway, for processing a lot of cabbage, nothing really beats something like this. It's really great. And the Benriner, extremely sharp, really good stuff. So I know they have many different kinds of these, but this is the basic one that I use. So that's pretty much the two things I do. If I'm making sauerkraut from this stage, all I do is take the weight in grams. So usually I would just do the whole cabbage, shred it like this, weigh it on a scale, and take 2% of that, or 2.5% of salt, and then mix it all together, and then let it sit for an hour or two, and then squeeze out the juices, and then put the whole thing, including all the juices, into a jar. So a cabbage this size will probably fit into a 1-liter mason jar. Stuff that all in there, put a weight on top, and then cover it, and I usually ferment for 5 to 7 days at room temperature. Room temperature here is typically in the upper 60s or lower 70s in general, so that's what I do. And I don't let it get too insanely sour. I like it tart and still crunchy, so that's the stage I take it at. So that's the most simple thing. Sometimes I mix red cabbage with green cabbage, sometimes mix in carrots. I've done some other videos about stuff like that. Or coleslaw, very simply just take this and mix it with whatever dressing you feel like. The simplest would be just vinaigrette. And I would probably usually add some kind of a miso or shoyu or shiokoji or something like that to give it a little kind of another dimension of umami in there. And also like a spicy chili element, like a hot sauce or something like that. So that's pretty much it. I think even the chunks, just like I was doing the Napa cabbage, I think with this batch, I have the perfect shape to do a quick pickle. So I'll do 2% salt on this, and I will add lemon peel. And right now I have some Meyer lemons, so that'll be a great thing. I'll peel the lemon peel, chop it up small, put it in there with the salt and some dried chili, and then mix it up, put it in the fridge for a few hours, and then it'll be a great, delicious side dish for dinner. So I think I'll do that with this here. I think with this I might make a coleslaw, or maybe save it for tomorrow and make a okonomiyaki, which should be a great use of this. So anyway, that is red cabbage. Let me know if you have any questions, and we'll see you on the next one.